Hello, everybody. How are you this evening? I'm so happy to be here. I'm thrilled to bring you to our first lecture of the Chautauqua Visual Arts Lecture Series. And what we're going to offer this year are 9 lectures every week for the next 9 weeks. And today we're starting with the amazing Mitra Khoresheh, who is incredible. She is a wonderful person that I know personally, and she's going to be able to share so much with you. Before I properly introduce her, though, I just want to say that if you want to take a look at what we're offering besides this lecture series, please feel free to go to our new website, which is art.chq.org. We got this amazing facelift, and we're offering so much more than we ever have been, especially because we're online, which is fantastic. So without further ado, I am going to introduce Mitra, okay? So Mitra is a curator, writer, and educator based in New York City. And as an independent curator, she's curated many exhibitions and performances of galleries, institutions, art fairs, at galleries, institutions, art fairs, not-for-profit organizations, as well as large-scale public art exhibitions in the United States and internationally. Her curated work has mainly focused on site-specific and performative practices with an emphasis on the body and performance and painting and other time-based media. So what's really wonderful too about Mitra is that she is able to pivot and really work with artists in this very personal way. I've had the great pleasure and honor of working with her and Harag Vatanian, who is one of our mentors, both of us to do this very interesting and colorful installation at her gallery, which is really a non-gallery gallery. And I think she'll be able to talk about that, called Signs and Symbols, which is in the Lower East Side in New York City. So anyway, I'm very excited to be able to introduce her. And then one more thing before I let you go, and so that she'll come on board here. Chip McCall, our fantastic manager of the Chautauqua Visual Arts, is going to be able to moderate the Q&A section after Mitra's presentation, which should be about 45 minutes. So the format of this lecture, just like all of our lectures were last year, we have an introduction by me this time, and then we have Mitra coming on and presenting her work and her wonderful experience, knowledge, what she's doing today. And then afterwards, we're going to have a wonderful Q&A. And I really, really would love a lively discussion. I welcome that. So ask anything you wish of Mitra, because she's one of the most generous people I know. So now, with that, here is Mitra. Thank you so much, Mitra, for being with us.
Hi. Thank you so much, Sharon, for that lovely introduction. And thanks to Chautauqua for having me. So I wanted to kind of talk today about, give you guys kind of like a personal history and kind of the origin story behind Signs and Symbols, and our kind of the model we operate under, what Signs and Symbols really is, how it came about, and kind of the story of the collective. So I'm from Canada, and I moved to New York in 2012 to kind of pursue my master's and start my curatorial career. And at first I started, you know, I was curating for other galleries, institutions. Yeah, so it was kind of a journey to get through to where I am today. So one of the first projects I did, was the water tank project. This project took about like 4 or 5 years to complete. So I was the curator of this project, and it was a large-scale public art project where we invited 100 artists, and we commissioned 100 artists to do original work of art on the topic of water. And we wrapped water tanks with these artworks all over the city. So this was a very interesting project, and, you know, I got to know a lot of artists. So this was kind of what I was doing. But then it kind of became this thing that, you know, I was also coinciding with doing this project. I was a curatorial director for another gallery, and I was doing exhibitions there and kind of always getting in trouble because being criticized because my exhibitions were not commercially viable, or, you know, there were a lot of performances. I mean, so at this point, I was curating the Water Tank Project. I was curating for this gallery in the Lower East Side. And I was doing my own projects on the side. So I basically was working 7 days a week and coming home and working on my own projects. And then I kind of realized that I wanted to be independent and not, you know, because I couldn't really show what I wanted to show. So for example, this was one of the last exhibitions that I did for this gallery, and I got in a lot of trouble because we stained the floor. You know, when you're curating at another person's space, you're limited to what you can really do, and you have to get approval from the owner all the time. And, you know, especially if it's a commercial gallery, you know, the first question is like, is this sellable? So this, for example, I locked the artist, Andres Carranza, in the gallery for 2 weeks, and he kind of created this floor to ceiling canvas, this painting that you were like physically inside. So then, so I was curating my exhibitions, curating for this gallery. Then I decided, you know, I needed my own space, like my own physical space. So at the time, an artist that I was working with, Rachel Libeskind, had the storefront studio that she shared with another artist in Vinegar Hill, in Brooklyn. And so she was going to do residencies all summer in Europe, and she didn't want to, you know, they both didn't want to lose the lease on their space. So we kind of turned this into our first physical space. We called it the Department of Signs and Symbols. And it was actually a name that Rachel, the artist, came up with herself. And this was kind of the origins. We kind of, you know, it was different than an exhibition venue. It was more a residency model. So it was divided into 2 spaces, so front space and a back space. And it was artist run in the sense that I would invite artists to kind of have a residency, and they would create a work or the project that they're working on for a month in the back, while physically being there every day to let people in to see the exhibition that was in the front. And then once that exhibition was done, they would rotate and they would have their physical exhibition in the front, while there'd be a new artist in residence in the back. So we did a lot of projects there. It was short-lived. It was about, you know, I would say like 4 months. And then we lost the space. You know, real estate, New York, landlords, anyway. So then we decided to kind of make it into a nomadic project. So this is actually the last exhibition that was at Department of Signs and Symbols. And it was an exhibition by Shahriar Arabi, who actually has a current exhibition at Signs and Symbols. Anyway, that's her exhibition. So then I decided to make this kind of a nomadic project where, you know, we kept the name. We decided to drop the department and keep it Signs and Symbols. And I was doing performances mainly and exhibitions all over the city, kind of like pop-ups or in other venues, or, you know, pop-ups in Europe and London. And so one of the main exhibitions that we did was in 2016, I think. I did the first performance of Ulai in 30 years in New York, which was very special. And, you know, it required 7 girls to stand outside with umbrellas. And the crowd he kind of like flipped the way you experience an exhibition. Instead of going inside the space, he kind of locked everybody out, and the space was empty. and he had the audience wait for like 45 minutes outside. And then he showed up, and just these girls were standing there for 45 minutes holding umbrellas. And then he goes in and he does his performance. And so he goes inside and he scratches with his fingers. Some can't, others don't. So then I also worked with this artist, Yasha, Slovenian artist, that we did many projects together. And he's performance-based. So I was working with him very closely. This is an exhibition we did in London. But then it started getting really difficult kind of doing these nomadic projects. We continued, but it kind of became this thing where it was almost more difficult to do. Not the curatorial or to create the work. It was more finding the spaces. Kind of became this, it became problematic where you'd be looking and trying to secure a venue, almost more time spent on that than actually, you know, working. But anyway, so we continued. This is a project of Yasha. And this is kind of when this kind of idea of, you know, even with the department, there was always this idea of a collective, you know, and the idea was to create a family, really like a collective, you know, where it's kind of a community and we all support each other. And it's just, I found myself kind of, every time I found an artist to work with, they kind of, you know, it wasn't just a one-off project. They kind of like, we started creating projects together and all under this like umbrella of like Signs and Symbols or Signs and Symbols Collective. So then in 2017, this is a project I did with Rachel Libeskind. It was called The Day the Father Died. And it was a live performance, and it was kind of like autobiographical performance. And it basically reenacted the funeral of Stalin, where Rachel kind of takes on the persona of like the reporter that announces Stalin has died, and then she becomes Stalin, she becomes her grandmother. It kind of goes back and forth. And this was a massive production. You know, we worked on this for almost like 6 months. You know, there was like 8 cast members. It was a massive production, but then again, it was only one night. So then, you know, it became tough where when I had the venue, Department of Signs and Symbols, I was able to program it constantly and like, you know, have the program kind of ongoing. And then it just became harder and harder where you could only do like 3 shows a year, 4 shows a year, if anything. And then just also really, it just all became problematic, this like need for space. So then I decided, you know what, like maybe I'm just going to go back to school. So I decided to do a PhD in performance because that, you know, that was my thing. And since I was very close to Ulay, and I had met Vito Aconci through Ulay, and I'd worked with Valley Export before too, I wanted to write my dissertation on the 3 of them, like do a really close case study on the 3 of them and their practices, specifically looking at what they were doing between 62 and 69. So I started, you know, going to Ljubljana every summer to spend, you know, time with Ulay and kind of pick his brain and do research and interviews. And then I moved to Dumbo to be closer kind of to Vito Aconci's studio. So I was kind of putting all of that together. And I wanted to do it at UNC with Amelia Jones, who's kind of like, she'd be the perfect person for my topic. So then on February, what was it? No, not February, April 28, 2017. While I'm doing all of this and preparing everything, Vito Aconci passes away. And it was a really hard time. And the day he passed away, I'm with Yasha, one of the performance artists I was working closely with as well. We got 3 tattoos on our, you know, it's on my elbow. And it was kind of this like, you know, to kind of like remember him, never forget, but also it represented like the three of them that I was writing about, and not to give up and to continue this. Then within like a month after, Amelia Jones decides to take a year of sabbatical. So I was like, God, what am I going to do? Okay, so this is delayed. I specifically wanted to do, I wanted to study with her, and I wanted her to be my advisor. So I kind of decided, you know, okay, it's delayed for a year. I'll work on this. I'll do more research. I'll get more, you know, interviews done and everything, and then I'll start this. So that summer, it was the summer of 2017. It was a couple months after Vito had passed away. I spent the summer in Ljubljana with Ulaj, kind of spending time with him, speaking to him, you know, all the stories, going through the archive. So he knew all about what I was working on. And then all of a sudden, like, you know, he was getting weak at the time. And all of a sudden he starts, like, he snapped at me one day. I'll never forget it. And he was like, darling, I think you should really stop. Like, do you want to spend the next 7 years writing about dead people? And I was like, what do you mean? No. And he's like, come on, Vito just passed away. I'm next. That, like, we're all at the time, like 76, 77, 78. And he's like, don't spend the next 7 years of your life writing about dead people. Do something with what, you know, this is great what you have. Do something. And I was like, what should I do? What do you mean? And he's like, I think you should open your own space and turn this dissertation proposal that you have into a program and kind of support a younger generation of artists. So that's kind of where the idea came from. So then I took the three of them, and I kind of really thought about what that would mean. Like, how do I make a contemporary program rooted in performance that kind of is based on these three people and their practice and their legacy, kind of. So I kind of made this, you know, I took them as historical anchors, and this is kind of the three things that I got from that. So Ulaj for me represents performance and photography. He's kind of the grandfather or father of performance art. And, you know, he also, performance was one of his subjects, but he did a lot of photography, and he worked with Polaroid, and performative photography is a term that he actually coined. Valley Export was very, you know, time-based media, performance, architectural interventions, and Vito Acconci, performance and architecture. So then I kind of decided to come up with, you know, went back to all of the artists that I've kind of been working with throughout the years and collecting, in a sense, and pitched them kind of the idea that I had. And, you know, so then we started looking for a space. Let me just get to that. So we started looking for a space. And it was a very collective, collaborative process to even find the space. I mean, the amount of time I spent with even the artists, like walking through New York, looking for the perfect venue, keeping all of them in mind, like their individual practices and their needs, and also wanting to kind of, you know, have it kind of sustainable and manageable where it wouldn't cost that much. When it costs, like, you know, and also having a space that was more intimate for the kind of environments and performances we wanted to create. And also this, you know, also because it was just, you know, I would be doing this all on my own. So I wanted also a space that's kind of manageable, that, you know, I could install with the artist, we could paint it ourselves, you know, not having this kind of massive, you know. So we found the space. So I found the space with the artists, and the artists were involved even to the point of, like, you know, designing the font and the logo. And, you know, Sarah Entwistle, one of the artists, she's trained as an architect. So she actually designed our gallery space. And, you know, another artist did the lighting. You know, they decided what color white should the walls should be. Everything was kind of this collaboration, and, you know, they all came to see the venue and everybody was happy with it. So the kind of model we decided, you know, I didn't want because I was coming from this curatorial background and I was a curator, and I just never liked this gallerist or dealer, or, you know, I didn't like any of that kind of, you know, and I wanted it to be a space where I, like, we used to call it, like, you know, as a curator studio, where you have like artist studio. This is like the curator studio that, you know, projects are at, and you can go see them. And a lot of the artists that I worked with were represented by other galleries. So I didn't want it to be this kind of space or this gallery kind of thing that, you know, requires representation or kind of conflicts with these artists working at other galleries. And, you know, so we decided to kind of have it be a non-gallery gallery. So that was the whole idea of it, that, you know, it's a space of experimentation, and artists could really do projects that their galleries wouldn't allow them to do because it was performance, or because it was, you know, not commercial, right? So, you know, and even just in my past experience, like curating for art fairs, performance was kind of always never its own thing. It was kind of programming, right? Even in institutions, it's a lot of performance is kind of, you know, considered like extra programming, or it's for an event or something like that. And, you know, all of these performance artists that were with other galleries, there wasn't like one gallery that was dedicated to performance. And it's kind of like every gallery has one or two artists that are performance. But I just, you know, I felt that there was a need for creating this, like, you know, greater appreciation for performance. So, and a community around it. So with that, kind of all of the artists were kind of predetermined. We launched the space together, and we opened on April 28, 2018. And it was on the 1-year anniversary passing of Vito Acconci. And we dedicated the program and the space to him. Yeah. So then I just wanted to kind of talk about a little bit about the projects that we do and the artists. You know, one thing is that it really is a family. It's kind of, I don't know even how to explain it. Like, even now with everything going on with the world, like, more and more, it's like, you know, I realize that it really is a family and a community. So all of these artists that I work with, kind of, you know, we have a history together, and it's all kind of, I don't know if it's fate, I don't know, you know, but it just kind of all, you know, from past projects or past encounters kind of came together. You know, and I install with all the artists ourselves. We really never work with, you know, we're painting the gallery ourselves, we're hanging everything ourselves. One of the requirements is that every exhibition has, even if it's not a performance artist, that it has a live performative element. So this is me and Tony Orico. He's an American visual artist, performance artist, and choreographer. He's based in Iowa City. And he does these beautiful performances using choreography and his own bodily kind of choreography with graphite to create these beautiful visual pieces with graphite. So we had his exhibition in January of last year. So he had 2 live performances at the gallery. So one was this one, and then this one. And then he had another performance where he wasn't performing, but his students, his dance students, he collaborated with them, and they kind of did this choreography based on, you know, his practice and in response to his exhibition. So then I thought I could show you guys like 45 seconds of a video. Okay. So then I wanted to, Jen Denike. So another artist that, you know, I work very closely with is Jen Denike. She's also American, based in Brooklyn. And so Jen, for example, is a perfect example of an artist that kind of, you know, I've been following for years, and we started working together officially with Signs and Symbols launching. But I was introduced to Jen's work actually through a lecture that Amy Smith Stewart was giving. She is the curator of the Aldridge Museum. And she was giving this lecture in 2013 and about her, you know, projects, her curatorial projects and her interests. And when she had a gallery space called Smith Stewart before she went to the Aldridge. And I remember, you know, out of her entire presentation, she had shown these slides of a ballet by this artist, Jen Denike. And that kind of always stuck with me. And a couple of years after, I met Jen at a dinner party of a mutual friend, and we immediately connected. We had so much in common, and, you know, we decided to work together. And so when I, you know, was putting together the whole idea for Signs and Symbols, I contacted her. She came to see the space, and this was her exhibition in February, I think. Yeah, it was right after Tony, and she kind of did a call and response to her 2010 ballet, which was called Scrying, and it was, you know, it premiered at the MoMA, and then it, you know, was shown in parts at Amy Smith Stewart's gallery and a bunch of other galleries. But so she kind of did a call and response to her original ballet. This one was called Crystal Cut Levitation, and crystals were an important part of the ballet. And it was a live ballet at the gallery, where she worked with 3 ballerinas, and the ballet was actually in hammocks. And it was just phenomenal. I'll show you guys a clip of that as well. I'm not sure if it's working. Okay. Okay. Then, so Carol SZYMANSKI, this was a really interesting. So Carol was an artist that actually worked with the gallery that I was the curatorial director for. So I met her, you know, at her last show, at that gallery. It was an amazing show. And I mean, I curated it, but it wasn't, you know, I had to follow the guidelines. It wasn't my space. But we became really good friends, and we kept in touch. And when I opened Signs and Symbols, she, you know, she came to me and she wanted to do a book launch of this book that she was working on, which was based on her, you know, Carol's an interesting character. She had like kind of this like past life where she was an artist, but then she needed to support her family. So she went into banking, and she was a banker for many years, but she wanted to kind of continue her art practice. And so she started this email project. And then she kind of, when she finished her banking career, she kind of quit, went back to art. And then based on that email project, and based on, you know, her experience, it was very autobiographical, this email project, she kind of made a book called Acquiescence. And it was all about her experience as a banker, as a female, and, you know, kind of the stuff that happened, these stories. And so she had put this book together, and she came to me and she wanted to do a book launch at the gallery at Signs and Symbols. And I said, she gave me the book, and I said, I'll get back to you. And it was such a great book. So I went back to her and I said, okay, Carol, I love the book. You can do a book launch, but I don't think, that does the project justice. I really think that you should make this into a performance piece. Like, this is a performance piece. And she was, Carol studied video and performance actually, as an artist, but she'd never worked in performance. So this was kind of a challenge. And I was like, you have to do this. If you want to show, I challenge you to make this into a performance piece. If not, then we're not doing it. So she's like, challenge accepted. And she wrote a script based on these 7 suits, these 7 characters, 7 characters that are all her, but they each represent one of the suits that she actually wore when she was a banker. And she had these beautiful designer suits like Valentino, Galliano. And so she wrote the script with all of these characters, and she did this installation at the gallery that was, an exhibition, but it was really the set. And we had this live performance with an audience every night. And I'll show you guys a clip of that too. That's Carol and her artist talk with Rachel Corbett. I'll show you guys that.
He was an English public school boy in every classic sort of sense, with a mischievous yet empathetic smile. The movements of his body in conversation always concluded in him putting his arm around the shoulder of a colleague. Some of his best years must have been at Eton, because in those conversations, it was always his point of reference somehow. His outstanding trait was that he was everyone's mate.
He made even the women feel good, as many commonly got ignored in most situations.
Or they were not really ignored, but seen in another light and addressed in another circumstance, even though it is the same situation.
We met for sushi lunch once. I asked him for his views, and they were different from what I expected.
Okay, so then what was next? Oh, Annabelle. So Annabelle also, so while I'm going through these, I just want to also talk about the stories of how each character came into my life and how they became part of this collective. So Annabel DAOU, another artist I met in 2012, when I was doing my MA, my curatorial professor, she actually took us to studio visit to visit Annabelle. And I didn't know she was a performance artist. She was working on, these text-based work at the time. But then she told us about this performance she was doing called Fortune at MoMA PS1. So I went and I completely fell in love with the project. I followed Fortune for years. We became friends. I showed Fortune in another institution, in another gallery. And then when I opened Signs and Symbols, I asked her, we developed this idea of because I always want to kind of, maximize what we can do in this little tiny space. So we came up with this idea of a performance in residency program where it's not an artist in residence, but it's the performance project is in residence at Signs and Symbols. So Annabelle did Fortune every single day for 6 months, every Sunday for 6 months, she did her performance Fortune, where, no matter what exhibition it was, whether it was Sharon and Rags, any exhibition, every Sunday, she was within the exhibition at a table and people could come and she would read their fortune. And it was the silent exchange and she would write your fortune down. And then towards the end of her performance in residence, we were always talking about doing a show. So we did this show and it was called When in the Course of Human Events. And so what Annabelle did was she made this scroll-like piece. I'll go back. So it's kind of a scroll and it starts with the line, the very top, when in the course of human events, it becomes necessary to, which is taken from the American Declaration of Independence. And she asked all the Signs and Symbols artists, all, artists, activists, poets, writers, to complete the sentence however they, however they felt, however they saw fit. And, it could take on political, it could be, it was very interesting. I'll show you guys some of the lines. So then this was her piece, and she made an audio piece to go with it that I'll let you guys listen to for a little bit.
I take a step back. I take a deep breath. I hold out my hands. I hold back my tears. I scream in the night.
I wait for the dawn.
I wait for the dawn.
I take to the streets.
I take to the streets.
I run for the hills.
I run for the hills.
I loosen my grip. I
loosen my grip. I lighten my load. I shoulder the burden. I break up the fight. I howl at the moon. I leave nothing behind. I save what I can. I mess it all up.
I tear it all down. I take what I want. I take what is mine.
So yeah, that kind of exhibition, it was, it was the main scroll where it was very participatory, but it had that sound piece where she's reading it in the first person, and it takes sounds from, all this kind of protest and chaos going all over the world, where she asked people to send her clips of this, sound of the streets. That's Annabelle reading her fortune performance. So then we did this live reading during Annabelle's show. It was towards the end, where we did this live performance event where she collaborated with a sound artist, and basically everybody that was there could go in the back room at Signs and Symbols and read live from the scroll. So I did it, Annabelle did it, and all of the public did it, and it was recorded, and it became this vinyl that we just launched actually on our online shop. So it's called Declaration, and it kind of takes the piece that you guys just listened to, but it has every single participant that was there that night reading live incorporated into it. Another artist, Jonah Bouquet, he is a choreographer that I actually, so Jonah, I met him through Rachel Libeskind and Tony. He's very good friends with Tony, and Rachel is actually an artist that sits on his board. Jonah has a nonprofit practice as well as a visual arts practice, and he's a very well-known dancer. So we did this exhibition, which was in March of this year, where he had his visual works, but he also danced and did performance and choreography almost every day in his exhibition. And this was a piece called The Genie, where he would, he was the genie, and he would dance, and he would go to the public and ask them the genie grants 3 wishes, and then the public would whisper in his ear what the secret was, or what their wish was. And then Jonah would kind of perform it in a dance, like he would make the wish into a choreography. So those were kind of the performance-based artists. And then we go into photography and time-based media. This is Ornella FIERES. She's German time-based artist, photographer. So when I moved with Ornella, so it's interesting how all of the artists, all of Signs and Symbols artists, they're half New York based, except for Tony, that's Iowa City. And the rest of them are all based in Berlin. So it's very this German and American kind of, I don't know how that happened, but I guess it happened. So that's me and Ornella at her exhibition. Ornella's a photographer that doesn't believe in creating new images, and she works with found images and technology, and algorithms, so she's very techie. So what she does basically, so this, for example, she sources old photographs that something is always like, just, you know, it's either overexposed or, you know, there's something wrong with the image, right? So she sources these old photographs, and then she's created an algorithm called the FFT, and it's a compression algorithm, where she scans the image, and she feeds it to the algorithm, and the computer kind of reads it based on all the information that was given to it, and then it kind of spits back this star image. So by placing them next to each other, she's like, this is the way the human eye understands an image, and this is the way the computer understands an image. So once it's in this compressed kind of state, she takes out one piece of information, and she can't control what it is. It's kind of like intuitive. And then she inverses the process, and she gets these kind of ghostly, beautiful photographs. So Wormke Leinkauf, they are a celebrated Berlin duo. It's a funny story how I met them. They were actually my 30th birthday gift. So I did my 30th birthday in Berlin. I was visiting a bunch of artists, and then one of my best friends has a gallery in Germany, and she came in Hamburg actually, and she came to Berlin for my birthday, and she kept saying, "What do you want for your birthday? What do you want for your birthday?" And I said, "No, don't get me anything." And she's like, "Tell me what you want. If you don't, I'm going to end up spending a, you know, stupid amount of money for a sweater or something that you're not even going to like." So I said, "Okay, fine. Arrange a studio visit for me of an artist that you think I would like." So she picks me up the day of my birthday, and she takes me for the studio. I had no idea what I was walking into, and it was the studio of Matthias Wormke and Mischa Leinkauf, who, when they showed me their project, I was like, oh my God, I remember this. Like, I actually live in Dumbo. So they were the artists that in 2014 replaced the Brooklyn Bridge American flags with white hand-sewn American flags it was July 21st to 22nd, 2014. They did this, and it was a project that was kind of 7 years in the making. You know, they're very meticulous when, you know, their practice kind of involves years of planning, research, site, you know, visits, and all of this stuff. So 7 years they worked on this until they can, you know, do the performance and get that one image. And so basically they realized their practice is kind of like performative interventions into public spaces, kind of always trying to draw attention to, you know, systems that are like failed systems. So here they were trying to call attention to the fact that why is there no surveillance on the Brooklyn Bridge, and kind of this flaw in the NYPD, you know, there's thousands of people that cross this bridge every day. Why is there no surveillance cameras? So on the eve of the 145th anniversary of the German-born architect who designed the bridge, his death, they went, took them 45 minutes. They went on the first bridge, exchanged it, second bridge, exchanged it. Took them 45 minutes in total to do this. They treated when they took the flags down, they treated it with the proper flag code and respect, not letting it hit the ground, the way it was folded. And then they kind of sat there to wait and see what happens. And it actually took 13 hours or something ridiculous until the NYPD even realized that, you know, the flags were replaced. So I love that project. So we showed them at Signs and Symbols. And they're not allowed to come to the US because obviously this became this huge, you know, huge thing. So we tried to do a performance because every exhibition is supposed to have this performative element. But since they're not allowed to come to the US, when I was there doing the studio visit, I took back their masks. And these are two of their students that we wanted to kind of do this performance at the opening where, like, are they coming? Are they not coming? Are they allowed to come? So it was months of working on this and having to, you know, get legal letters for them that they're not, this is a performance, it's a work for hire for the performers, it's not actually them. And then, you know, they were supposed to walk in and do this performance, but we had to cancel it last minute because at the day of the opening, the NYPD was parked outside the gallery and stayed there and for the duration of the exhibition. So the performers were actually too scared. So we decided, you know, that's the piece in and of itself, that they can't do it. Michelle Handelman, another video and performance artist that I've worked with for years. And this is a performance that she did at the gallery within her exhibition, where she had her students participate in it, and Viva Ruiz. That's Rachel Libeskind, who named Signs and Symbols. So she's the namesake based on Nabokov's essay. And that's, so she's been part of the family from the very beginning, and that's her daughter. And at Rachel's exhibition, her Esther was like 2 weeks old at the time. Let's just go through this a bit. So then we get to architecture. So architecture was kind of from Vito, so that part of it. But so Sarah Entwistle, she's an artist that's trained as an architect, but she's a visual artist. She designed the gallery, all the lights and everything, you know, she designed it all. And this was her exhibition. She is, you know, I've been close with Sarah for many, many years. I'm actually very good friends with her husband and her children. But I never really knew her work very well. She doesn't really talk about, you know, her practice. And then a couple of years ago, they're based in Berlin. A couple of years ago when I was coming back, she gave me an artist book that she had just made. And then I read it on my flight back, and I couldn't put it down. And then when I got back, I was like, Sarah, we have to do an exhibition. And I wanted to do this at, you know, the Glass House or somewhere else, but it ended up being at Signs and Symbols. So it was basically Sarah. It's an interesting story. I love telling the story. So she is the granddaughter of Clive Entwistle, who was an architect, well-known architect, who died in the 70s, but Sarah kind of never met her grandfather. She never knew what he did. He was kind of absent and erased from their family history. You know, the grandparents had gotten a divorce early on, and he was kind of this womanizer. So, you know, nobody kind of ever talked about him. So, you know, Sarah grew up not knowing anything about her grandfather, even that he was an architect. And she goes to architecture school. And when she was teaching after her, you know, when she was teaching at the Architecture Association in London, she gets a call from a Manhattan storage locker saying that, you know, we need to get rid of this stuff. It's about to go in auction. It was your grandfather's. Do you want to take it? So she comes to New York, and she discovers this body of this archive of work of her grandfather. Like he was kind of the most unknown architect, I kind of want to call him. Like he collaborated with Le Corbusier. He designed so much stuff. And like the Madison Square Garden, or the original designs were him. But he kind of a lot of his projects, 90% of his projects, I want to say, were unrealized for various reasons. So Sarah's practice has kind of become this dialogue with this archive. So this exhibition that she did at Signs and Symbols is based on a image, a staged interior by her grandfather. That's the image of it. So that was kind of Sarah's version. She's playing with materials, lines, and everything from the archive, from love letters to, you know, this very personal, like, body of work that she inherited. And so she's not a performance artist, Sarah. So she collaborated with Reese Tivy and Natalie Darren Johnson, and they kind of did this performance where Natalie danced and Reese kind of created sound and music based on these vessels and copper like prototypes that were in the archive. her grandfather's archive. Then we get to one of my favorites, Sharon and her Rags. So Sharon, I know Sharon from, actually it was a lecture kind of like this a couple of years back that Sharon had invited me to. And I was actually I was in Europe, and I wasn't thinking I was going to be back on time for it. I'm so happy I did. And so I agreed to do the lecture, and I literally came from the airport directly to New York Academy of Arts. And that's when I met Sharon, and the rest is history. And we did this project where her and her Ag created this beautiful space, architectural, like, space with Sharon's kind of the base of it. And then Harag and Sharon did the interiors all together. And it became this, I had 300 and something balloons. I don't even know how many. We were blowing balloons. Actually, Chip was there too, blowing balloons with us every week. This is the back room, which was the balloon room. There's Sharon. And it became this kind of space that they created, not knowing what it was going to result in. And it became this place of like talks and people getting together and sitting and, and also it became this social media phenomenon that like we had around the block people lined up to come and pose and take selfies in Sharon and Harag's installation. So it became, a life of its own. And then Shahrir Arabi, our current exhibition, she was the last exhibition at the Department of Signs and Symbols, and she's the current exhibition right now at Signs and Symbols. And she actually only had an opening one day on March 14, and then we had to close, and that's still installed there. And it's a site-specific piece based from found materials that she found, and it has a sound piece. It's open by appointment. There it is. And we always joke around about, how there would be no Signs and Symbols opening if some kind of, weather phenomena or something didn't happen. There's always a snowstorm. Jen's ballet was on the coldest day of the year. There's always something. So, now Shaya takes the cake with a global pandemic happening. And I think I have a slide. Yeah, we can listen and see her performance. Okay. So then, Artists and Allies. Okay, so Artists and Allies, it's kind of our annual August exhibition performance marathon kind of thing. And we started at the first year. It actually started because the artist that was supposed to have an August exhibition, the first year the gallery opened, was in a motorcycle accident. So he had to cancel like 2 days before. And he's based in Costa Rica, so he couldn't even fly to New York. And I was kind of like, oh my God, what do we do? And we decided to do, I put it together in a week, and it was Artists and Allies. And the whole idea was it's a group show with all the artists, Signs and Symbols artists and allies that like not, artists that I want to show or, are close to the gallery or our program or, but the whole idea is that the gallery is open in August, even though people are away. We're open. You can always come to the gallery, and there'll always be a physical show, but then there is, a program of, every other day there's a screening or a live performance. So this was our first one. Amy Koshbin, you know, different performances every single day. Jen did her first ballet. So this was the second Artists and Allies. And last year, this was last summer, Artists and Allies, we kind of added a second component that it was Artists and Allies and their children to kind of show the importance of community. And basically it was all of the artists of the gallery and all of their kids created work, and I installed it kind of all together that you couldn't, unless you had the checklist, you couldn't tell which is a kid's work and which is an adult's work. And then we did the kids' work. We had a live auction actually, and we were able to raise money for, wait, do I not have a photo? For the Children's Museum of Art and Storytelling. So that was last summer. This summer we're going to do Artists and Allies also, but it's going to be online only. So we're trying to figure that out. So the collective model, it's really like, it's, you know, even the LLC is called Signs and Symbols Collective. Like even before the gallery existed, it was always this collective. And it truly is like the artists are all friends now. You know, we spend Thanksgivings together. It's just really, really this community. That's us at our annual Christmas party. Even Bridget, that is the only person that actually runs Signs and Symbols with me. She's our sales director. She was one of my interns 5 years ago. So she's kind of been part of the family since the very beginning. That's our Thanksgivings with all of the artists. That's us kind of, you know, we paint, we do everything ourselves. We install with the children. That's Artists and Allies. So this was the children's part of it. So it's kind of mixed, like Sharon's work is there, Matthew's work is there, Tony's work is there, but then all their kids' works are kind of there together with them. That's Jen and Ike making work with the kids. And so now this shift that we're all having to kind of do is when the gallery closed, we had to close, and all of these like online viewing rooms and, you know, PDF exhibitions kind of popped up. I kind of didn't know what to do for the first 2 weeks, because it was, you know, my program really depends on, you know, the live in-person kind of experience, and how can you really do this on a PDF? And I couldn't wrap my head around it. And I really believe that, you know, you have to kind of be there as a live participant, or, you know, how can we adapt this to the online world? So we decided, instead of doing, you know, PDF online exhibitions, that we would only focus on video exhibitions, and specifically videos that were not meant to be video installations, that would always have been, anyway, if the gallery was still open, they would have been exhibited like single channel videos that you would be with a headphone anyway. So we've started kind of this online solo presentation of videos. And so it's every 2 weeks. We're doing some online performances. So Annabelle DAOU here, like she's doing an online virtual performance on our Instagram. So we're trying to get around that. And then, so we also launched this online shop, because we're like, how are we going to pay for rent when we're closed? And we've been closed now for 4 months. And I wasn't able to negotiate anything with the landlord. So we're like, okay, what do we do? So we launched this online shop where, you know, there's special initiatives from, like, you know, you could have a private virtual performance to vinyl editions. Like all the artists kind of came up with these special initiatives on our shop. But then we also did this thing called the Signs and Symbols Postcard Project, where every artist, I asked every artist to kind of create with whatever material that they had in their studio all over the world in lockdown, postcard size artworks, like original artworks, but postcard size. And basically whoever purchased them, they would get a surprise piece of art by an artist, and I would assign them based on geography or who I think would, you know, if it's somebody that bought it in London, they would get a German-based artist, you know, or if it was New York, they would get a New York or LA. And it was kind of this idea that you don't know what the artist is going to be. You receive this personal artwork, and it's the return address is the artist's address. So you're kind of free to do whatever you want with this artwork, or you can respond and kind of create this socially distance engagement with an artist. And I mean, it's, you know, crazy how it worked. And that's how we paid our rents during the last little while. And that's kind of, the future is unknown. So we don't know what and when we're able to kind of go back to everything. The gallery's by appointment only now. And, you know, we're just kind of taking it day by day to see when and how we can, you know, continue. Artists and Allies will definitely be online this summer. But yeah, it's just kind of day by day. And this whole experience has kind of shown me how important this community really is, because, you know, they're the ones that helped me get through these past 4 months. Without, you know, their support, the artist support, we really couldn't get through. And yeah, that's it. So I guess we can take questions. Chat.
So Mitra, that was amazing.
Thank you, Sharon.
That was pretty incredible. So I'm going to start the questions. I think people are just thinking, because that was just phenomenal, and my heart hurts. I wish I could just give you a big hug, and I wish we could hug each other. But
I know.
It also reminds me, I got to do those postcards. Oh my God. You know, what's funny is I sent postcards to many of our participants of the 2020 Chautauqua School of Art residency program who are with us tonight. And so the idea of mail art too has there's been a lot of energy about that. So I just wonder too, like, is that something that could take off again? Because that sort of seems like I think if Ray Johnson was alive today, he probably would be part of your program in some way, because it seems like him and Vito Conchi would have a lot in common as far as how they communicated with others. I mean, what do you think about that kind of communication for artists, and which seems to be so natural and would be, I think, for very fulfilling right now?
Mm-hmm. I mean, I didn't, at first when I started this postcard project, I didn't know if it was going to work. You are actually one of the inspirations, because I love receiving mail from you, and I feel like you're the #1 person that I receive mail from. And it's just like, you get so happy, and every time I receive mail, I get so happy. And it's also this thing that, I mean, artwork is expensive, and it's not necessarily like, I would love to have so much artwork, but I can't afford half of the artwork that I want. So I thought this was like a nice way to kind of not just create this, relationships via mail art, but also be able to have something that's kind of like time capsule, time stamped for this moment, and also be able to like afford something. And I was really, the artists all blew my mind of like what, the actual amount of time they spent on these, and each one of them became like its own series. They numbered every single one, it was really special. And then I saw that it brought a lot of new audience to the gallery, but also people started collecting them, and like they would message me and be like, well, I already have like a Jen Denike and a Drew Conrad, like can I get a Jonah Bouquet next time? Or it was really nice. And I don't know if we will, like, we're talking about whether we continue it after the pandemic or not, just because it's, it is a very special price and a special kind of thing, and it's meant to kind of be during this time, but it is something that everybody's kind of really loved. So it's like, do we continue it, or do we do something different, or is it maybe something that's every artist and allies, or but for now we're still continuing it, because you still have postcards, Yasha has postcards to go.
I know. I have 100 postcards here, and I just have to sit down and do them. I think Chip has a couple questions from people who, Chip, do you want to pop in? Or no, there's Allison. Allison is one of our wonderful artists in our cohort, so she's going to ask a question.
Yes, indeed. You talk about how your gallery has developed into a collective over the years with this family of people. Do you share the direction of your next exhibits or your curatorial responsibilities? Is that a collective as well? Do you all really share that as a group?
No, not really. It's kind of like, yeah, I mean, they all know what is coming next. They all kind of know the program. They all know each other's, but I'm the curator. I work with each artist individually. Yeah, so I'm more the curator, and but it's a collective in the sense that we do everything together, like me with the artists.
I see. Yeah. So do they inform each other's work? Do they collaborate sometimes? It has to happen, right?
Yeah, sometimes. Yeah. And they've all become friends. They go to each other's openings. They support each other. We have this joke that like, I'm mom and Bridget is dad. She's the sales director, because, we need to have a sales director, and all the artists are our children. And basically mom is the curator that like deals with all the kids and comes up with these crazy ideas, and dad kind of tries to like, be like, okay, well, this is doable. This is going to cost too much, guys. Like, let's think this through,
So in your conversations with your artists, how much time do you spend kind of developing their thinking with them? Or do you come together with, this is our idea, we're moving forward with that? Or do you really kind of bring them along with little seeds of ideas?
It depends, which, like some artists really have their vision, and I kind of let them do what they want to do, and I'm there for support. But I mean, other artists, like it's like from like the inception of the idea to like the very end of it. It really depends what the project is. But I mean, talking and developing, I talk to all of them almost every day.
Oh.
You know, especially now that we're all in, you know, I mean, I couldn't have gotten through the last 108 days. I haven't left my apartment.
Oh.
I haven't gone to the gallery. I've been here. I've only seen the artists that stop by on the stoop to give me postcards to send to people. Yeah, I mean, it's you know, and it shows you this community, the value of community, because I mean, if it wasn't for the postcard project, I couldn't have paid the gallery's rent. You know, I would have lost my mind. Just like you know, I don't have family in New York. I'm from Canada. I can't leave the country now because I wouldn't be able to get back in. So it's, you know, it really is this kind of community. You know, I mean, I remember someone once told me, and I always knew this, but it's now that it's kind of shown itself, is your only true asset in life is who you surround yourself with, and with your community, you know?
Right. Amazing that you've provided a place for them all. I'm sure they're very grateful.
I'm grateful to them.
Well, thank you for
Oh, what happened there? I think Mitra, we have another question from Jason, and I'm just gonna scroll up here to ask that question because he says, do you have any words or wisdom or advice for artists looking to start their own initiative collective with the hurdles of venues and gallery restrictions that you faced in the earlier iterations of Signs and Symbols? And I think that would be a really good thing to share with everybody. I also, just to also warm up that question, I think you can also comment how it might be different in New York versus other places too.
I mean, it's New York is just so difficult to find a space, and the real estate is so great. Like, I'm hoping this, you know, the positive thing that this pandemic will bring is that the real estate market will, you know, go down. But that's the most difficult thing, is like having a space and finding real estate. I mean, I have friends that have spaces in Germany, and their rent per month is my Wi-Fi bill. You know, it's really, really expensive in New York. My advice is, especially like for the next little while, I think things should be nomadic in New York, at least. I think other places it's different. I also really like this idea of, you know, thinking for new possible models of like showing.
Yeah.
You know, why does it only have to be at one, like at Signs and Symbols storefront? Like, why can't we also have an exhibition there, something online, and something in my apartment? You know, by appointment only. Like, it seems like that's kind of gonna be the new normal for a while. Yeah.
Well,
I really believe in artists starting their own collectives. Like, so many like galleries that I love, like Canada Gallery. Do you guys remember Regina Rex?
Yes.
You know, like, or Signal, like they were all like artist collectives, artists started, artists run, you know, and it kind of becomes this point that's when something inevitably turns into a gallery, even if you call it a non-gallery gallery, or even if it's artist run, there kind of becomes a point that like you have to make this decision of like whether you want to continue or whether or not. Like, I think that's why Signal, for example, and Regina Rex closed, was because they realized they started this to support each other as an artist collective and show each other's work, but then it became too much of a business, you know? And I think that's the problem with New York, is that you have to kind of figure out a way to have that business side of it to be able to pay rent, unless you do it as a 501c3, which I'm seriously considering turning Signs and Symbols into, because I think that's more true to the model that I want to do.
That's great, and I just want to introduce Devin Wilson, who's an artist also, Devin, if you just click onto your camera. And while we're bringing him in, I just also want to say that you've always been ahead of the curve. And I think that the art world just doesn't know what to do with you, essentially. And so, I think educators like, Devin, can you just mute for a second? You just mute your camera for a second. Audio, just press the audio. I'm hearing myself. That's all right. I'll make my point after Devin talks then. Devin, we'll hear your question, and then I want to go back to what you were saying.
Yeah, so you were talking a lot about like these artist-run spaces or these collectives that are slowly coming out, and it's funny that you mentioned your apartment. I recently started this really small gallery from my bedroom, and trying to keep up with these things just seems like a very big task. Like, I feel like I'm doing everything from marketing to media to outreach to trying to find these things. So just how does one start and sustain like the process without trying to get burnt out by trying to do all these different things?
You don't. It doesn't work like that.
Great.
The only way I'm okay. So my Signs and Symbols is like my baby. I eat, breathe, sleep. I have nothing else than like, you know, the space, like the artist, like it's my life, you know. I wake up, it's like that's that, and I really believe that if it just there is no way if you want something to be successful. I think you have to there is no separation. I mean, even it's funny you say the apartment. I mean, we have this dinner series called The Apartment, you know, because when we had the first space, the Department of Signs and Symbols, we used to call it The Department. And then we had a dinner series called The Apartment. And it was like dinner 001, and we did it all the way to 100. And it's where artists cook. And it's like a seated dinner for 8 people. And you're invited and you don't know who is going to be at the dinner and you don't know any other person. So you're invited to this, you know. So it's just, there is no separation. I mean, my dog lives at the gallery with me.
I was just trying to sustain like being an artist and trying to do the curatorial side. It's like that plus trying to find a job after like a BFA. It's like running full steam.
Well, there's a way to make it part of your practice, right? Like if you have your art practice, you can, you know, me and Sharon talk about this all the time about like wearing different hats. You know, I feel that like Sharon's, you know, what she does at Chautauqua and even these like, you know, artist lecture series, that's part of her practice as an artist as well. You know, or like Annabelle DAOU, she does a lot of like activist work, and I like think that's part of her practice, you know.
And I should say Jen tonight too. You know, that she does the curatorial.
Exactly. Yeah. Exactly. Yeah, and it's an extension of her. So Jen is a perfect example. She started a curatorial project in her apartment. You know, she's still doing her practice. You know, she shows a bunch of different galleries. She has museum exhibitions, but she has this curatorial project she runs from her apartment studio, where it's supporting her artist friends, basically. You know, but she kind of include like it's like the themes and like the concepts that she comes up with. It's really an extension of her practice too.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Devin. I wanted to just finish while we're waiting for another question. I wanted to say that, you know, you are really ahead of the curve. And I feel that the art world struggles with that as far as figuring that out, because the market is so fixed into one way of thinking. And so that kind of difficulty is, I think, takes time, you know, and just like you are so much like an artist because your vision is ahead. And I feel that even though you have gotten a lot of press from Art News, Hyperallergic, and all of these other places, it's saying that this is what I think what it should be. And the versatility and the elasticity and the intimacy that you share. I'm just hoping that there are a lot of people here that can see Mitra's incredible vision to follow her and participate. And earlier I put her shop, a link to her shop, and I will do that again right now. And I feel that if people really want to participate and want to support the gallery, that all you need to go to is the shop right there. There's the link, and pay for and contribute and receive a piece of one of these wonderful artists that Mitra collaborates with. So in the meantime, we've got Elizabeth Levy here, and Elizabeth is our apprentice to the core mentors that we have at Chautauqua. And so Elizabeth, what's your question?
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Mm-hmm. Perfect. Thank you for your talk. And I was curious if you could speak a little bit more about the difference of the role of a curator in a non-gallery gallery like Signs and Symbols versus the role of a curator in a more traditional gallery setting. And just kind of generally what you think the most important role of a curator is as there's movement away from that traditional gallery model.
Mm-hmm. I think the difference is, I mean, so when I was a curator at other galleries, it's like, you know, yes, they want you, the gallery owner wants you to kind of like contextualize an art history and, you know, contextualize the work, right? But they also want you to curate based on X amount of like net profit, you know? So that was my biggest problem, was that. And then, you know, also when you're curating for other galleries, you're not necessarily showing what you want to show. You're showing the other artists that are already at the gallery. Yes, you can try to like, you know, squeeze other artists in where you can, but it's really like market driven and commercial driven. So my approach is really different. I mean, I don't like there's like 90% of the shows are not even sellable, you know? So then we always try to make something that can be, or then to make it sustainable, I have to, like when I'm curating the program and putting the program together, I have to space things out. So that's kind of my biggest challenge is like, okay, you know, we've done 2 painting shows, for example. Not they're, you know, I try to make them performative or have some kind of, you know, sound or, you know, but it really needs to be kind of scheduled in a way that, you know, there's one painting show that we know is going to do very well that kind of sustains the program for the next like 10 months, where you don't have to work. I hate, like, that's the thing that, you know, drove me crazy, is always having to think, you know, of, oh my God, but is this, you know, good in a gallery setting? That's why I don't like the word gallery. Non-gallery.
Thank you.
Non-gallery.
I like that, non-gallery gallery. Well, thank you, Elizabeth. I really appreciate it. I find I'm getting other questions. Isn't this familiar that this is how we met one another, during doing the same thing. So Jessie Lee, who's also one of our wonderful participants of our lecture series, asked, what is the Sugar Hill Children's Museum? And Jessie, it's an amazing place, but maybe you can give a context to it. And then I'm also going to ask another question by Katie Schulman right after.
Okay. So I met the woman that, I don't think she's there anymore actually, but she's the development director of the Sugar Hill Museum. And it's a museum of art and storytelling for children. And they have this amazing program. And I met her through when I was doing the water tank project. I met her because we did this bottle project, part of the water tank project, where we did like, you know, reusable water bottles with artworks on them. And then we donated them to the children and the museum. So I had this relationship with them, and, you know, they're a nonprofit. They don't have a massive operating budget. I mean, we raised almost $1,000 through $20 works of children's art. And, you know, I asked the kid. So the thing with the kids was also, so I decided that that's where we wanted to donate their funds, but they had guidelines when they were, you know, they were invited because their parent is either an artist of the gallery or an ally of the gallery. So they're all children of artists, but they were given guidelines that, you know, everything is going to be sold at $20. You can do any medium you want, but it has to fit within the three: performance, photography, architecture, or like how they overlap. And then they were also given this question of like, do we donate to the museum or do we want to keep our money? So it was kind of this, you know, trying to teach them like, oh, art, you can sell it, but like, do you want to be somebody generous? You know, do you want to give back? Or, you know, so that it was funny because we then, once the pieces started to sell, we had these like 2 columns in our little document called like greedy children, non-greedy children, but they all ended up in the end wanting to donate. There was one child that said, actually, can I donate to Australia, like the wildfires? Yeah, instead of the Children's Museum. And I said, okay, you know, so it was really like interesting. And I love that, you know, I take my godkids there all the time. So that's, you know,
so great.
Yeah, but it's called the Children's Museum of Art and Storytelling.
Thank you. And so that's the Sugar Hill Museum. Is that what you're saying? Okay. Yeah. And I am stand corrected because Jessie Lee, actually, she works there. So she does know about it. But yeah. I love that you just explained all that, because for everybody else who doesn't know, it's just a wonderful, I think, opportunity for people to know about it. I remember you sharing to me before that, and I love that wonderful story. It's great.
You were in that show too.
Oh yeah, I can't remember. I don't remember anything. I don't remember. Okay, so we have Katie Schulman, who's also one of our wonderful 38 of the 38 people that were invited to and accepted into our program. She gave us this. Let's see. She says, I'm wondering how you do most of your research to find new artists to collaborate with, etc. So, and then after that, I have a question by Leslie.
Okay. So the finding artists, I mean, it's kind of been this ongoing, you know, it just happens. I've never really kind of gone after looking for an artist. They've all sort of somehow been introduced by somebody or recommended, you know, or just happened to meeting them, or, you know, it's kind of this like intuitive, natural process. I go to a lot of MFA shows, but I've never found artists that way. They've all kind of naturally, organically, I've met them, I've loved their work, or, you know, one, for example, Yasha, specifically, he cold emailed me. Cool. And he cold, like, the topic was perhaps Yasha, the subject. And I opened it and I was like, okay. And I looked through his CV and I realized that he was doing a residency at, where was it? What is the space in Red Hook? Pioneer Works.
Yes.
He was doing a residency in Pioneer Works at the same time that another artist that I work with was doing a residency. So I asked him, I'm like, oh, do you know this artist, Yasha? And he just said, yeah, great artist, beautiful human being. You'll really love him. And then it kind of just, we never met, nothing. 3 years later, I was at the Venice Biennial in 2014 or 15, one of those years. And I just stumbled upon this pavilion that was a performance pavilion, and it kind of blew my mind. And it was at the end of the day, and I was kind of tired, and it was in the Arsenale, and it blew my mind. And I was like, oh my God, this is my favorite piece, or National Pavilion. And I stayed there half of the rest of the day until they closed. And then at the end, I wanted to see who the artist is, and it was Yasha.
Oh my God.
So it was kind of this, like, you know, it's really, I don't know, like Sharon, I met through a lecture, you know, all of them, you know. The only one thing is that I don't work with artists that are not generous. I always say that, like, they have to be like team player, family, generous. Doesn't matter how great their work is. If they're not a good person, I won't work with them. Oh. That's the main rule.
Thank you for saying that. I'm grateful that you said that, because I think that obviously generosity yields generosity, and it's so funny connections that you've made. Like Jen Denike and I showed in the same gallery 15 years ago, and then circle around, and there she is. And I just love her and her work, and I have to connect with her. When I was going through this, I was like, oh my God, so many reminders of great people.
Yeah.
We have another question from Leslie Fandrick, who is also a part of our cohort this summer. And she says, I have a question about Mitra's connections in Canada. And is she involved with projects there as well? Good question.
Not at all. No, not at all. Like I don't work with any Canadian artist. I don't spend that much time there. And I kind of started my career in New York. You know, I studied in Vancouver, but I have no connection to the art world there. It's very strange.
Yeah.
Yeah. No.
Seems
I'd
like
love to like spend more time, but I just never do. And I've just always been in New York.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Seems like you're embedded in New York.
Mm-hmm.
So while I'm waiting for, if we have another question or two, and then we'll wrap it up this evening. And for those artists who were fortunate enough to have a studio visit with Mitra, which I'll talk to you about later, Mitra, that she's going to spend more time with you. And I'm hoping I can bring Mitra back next year for everyone to meet her in person. I really am very conscious of the fact that we're all not able to really feel each other in person. So this feels like a warm up to more in-person conversations. But anybody want to pop in and ask a question for Mitra? Mitra, I would love when I come back to see you in Dumbo. We're so near each other in Dumbo, and hopefully we'll be able to open our doors and stand at least 3 feet away from each other.
Yeah.
So sad. Is everything okay there?
I mean, tomorrow will be the first day I go to the gallery, to go to Manhattan.
Oh my God.
My apartment. It's kind of like, you know, so we have appointments tomorrow because we're open by appointment, but I haven't had to go because nobody made an appointment. I feel like, you know, it takes people a little bit of time to feel comfortable. So we finally have appointments. And so I'm going for the first time in what I've lost track. It's 109 days. Like,
oh my gosh.
A little bit. Yeah.
Amazing. Well, I don't see anybody coming through. I think you answered everybody's questions. I just want to say a big thank you. Big. How do I do this? How do I do this? And I've done this before where if we touch our hands on the sides, I don't know if anybody has done this here, if to the sides of the screen, if you go on the sides, then you can feel, do you feel me? I feel you.
I do.
I feel you. I feel you. And I think everyone who attended today felt your energy and generosity. And I just want to thank you so much for being here tonight. And thank you everybody who's attended. And next, and I think before we get to the final slide, but we're going to show a slide for next week, but do you want to say anything else to conclude?
Me?
Mitra? Yeah.
I just want to look at because I made notes and I didn't even look at the notes. Yeah, I think I went through it all. Yeah, I didn't even look at my notes. I was like, you know, telling you guys the story.
It's amazing.
Amazing
really
story. Think that, you know, being a curator is being a storyteller.
Yes.
You know? And it's kind of, I really enjoyed putting these slides together because I was like, I don't usually talk, I'm always talking about telling the stories of the artist, but this was kind of telling the story of the collective. So it was really fun. And thank you for having me, Sharon, and Chautauqua. And Chip, thank you so much for running this smoothly.
Oh, I had to thank a whole team, actually, Chip, and I hardly did anything. Everybody behind the scenes, there's a lot of people behind the scenes who are doing this, and we're really appreciative of you kicking it off so well. And thank you for your generosity. And I will catch up with you, and I'm so honored to be your friend and so grateful for all you do for all of us. So thank you.
Thank you. Mwah.
I caught it. And for everybody else, I just want to conclude. I think we have a last slide here. we're going to look forward to seeing everybody next week, which we have at 6:30 p.m. with a lecture with Salvador Jimenez Flores, who's fantastic. Actually, Rahele Filsufi, who is one of our mentors, highly recommended him. And he is just amazing artist coming out of Chicago. His base is primarily ceramics. So those of you who are really vested in ceramics, you won't want to miss this. So we look forward to seeing you next week. And thank you to everyone who's attended, but also thank you, Chautauqua, and all the people who worked so hard to start this program, to get this off the ground. I'm absolutely ecstatic that we're going forward. See you next week. Good night.